Hello class, and welcome to our video for completing chapter 8 of your textbook, which is the next chapter that you need to work on. So I've already turned there in my book. Make sure you also download the files from foundationsofwebdesign.com, extract them so that way we can get started. So we're talking about the box model in this chapter. All HTML elements displayed in the browser are drawn in a box shape. While the shape isn't always a perfect square, it does have four sides: top, right, bottom, and left, and a central content area surrounded by an area of padding, and then a border, then an outer margin area. And you can see this in figure 8.1. So you got content, padding, border, margin, and it slowly goes further out. CSS can target these sides to manipulate elements in various ways. For example, by adding padding, margins, and borders to the different sides, or by adding images and color inside the content, padding, and border areas, you can do all those things. So on the next page here, figure 8 box dimensions, the content should be a paragraph, list, text header, or object, so like an image or a video. The padding is the space between the content and the border. The default padding value is the initial value of the individual HTML element. The border is the box's outer edge. By default, the border style is set to none, which means the border will not display, and which sets the border width to 0. If there's no padding, the border sits at the outer edge of content. And then a margin is the space outside the box. The default margin value is the initial value of the individual HTML element. So we're going to be working with a box and applying that to our actual website. Working with the box. While this description offers a visual idea of the box, getting into the code and viewing it in the browser will clearly demonstrate the box's properties and their values. The document 01 box model HTML in the FOWD chapter 8 folder has the following HTML code. So let's open that up so we can see it. So I'm going to click open file. It's going to take its time. I'm going to get to my folder. Alright, and then it says here box1 model.html, and it shows the text there. The child element, I haven't opened it up yet, but well, actually, let's just go ahead and do that. I'll zoom in so you can get a better look at it. Oh. And let's wrap our text. The child element, the paragraph element, and it's of course the child element because it's contained within the div element, which is our parent element. So with the value of box is contained within the parent div element that has the class attribute with the value container. The text of the paragraph element right here is your content inside the box, and you can even see class right here, box. Since content is not a CSS property, you could use as one option an element type selector paragraph to apply styles to your content. And the content is the text of the paragraph element, and you can see it in figure 8.2 on the next page. Now, child and parent elements. When an element, paragraph, is within another element, div, so you can see that, it's considered the child. So we've already talked about that. Are there siblings? When there is an H1 element above another element, paragraph, the second paragraph element is the sibling of the H1. So if I had an H1 right here before paragraph, this would make the paragraph 1 a sibling. The CSS document, you'll use the style of your HTML, which is linked to 01 box model.html, can be found in the CSS folder under the name box model. So, alright, so I'm going to go and I need to do a browser preview here so I can see what it's going to look like as we change it before I open up the CSS file. So I'm going to choose browser preview so I can look at it right over here as we edit it. So I'll try to make this a little bit bigger for you to see it. Alright, so I actually want to go to, instead of box model over here, I want to do go over to CSS. So I'm going to click in here before I open the file to make sure it displays correctly. CSS box model. Alright, so right here I have it available. And let's get going here. So note the pre-coded code in here, let me zoom in for you. You can see I already have container with the 50% margin at 10% auto, and so that's why it's in the center here. In some examples, you'll notice the CSS document has some rules applied already. This simply helps to center the demonstrations in the browser. Always take time to study the code, even if you don't know what it does, and usually you'll understand by the end of the chapter. Now the border, before talking about the padding, let's move to the border, the area between the padding and the margin. Since its default style value is none, we cannot see any border. To create a visible border, we need to use the border style property. Remember, there are 4 sides to your element: top, right, bottom, and left. The first rule set will apply a solid line to all 4. So I need to put it down here where it says write example CSS below. I'll click here, I'll tab, and then start typing in border, top, style, solid, semicolon. So you're just going to type this information in. So hopefully it's zoomed in far enough for you to be able to see. You'll notice when we talk about these different ones, we basically go in a clockwise order. So we start at the top, then the right, then the bottom, and the left. And it's important for the style there. So after I've made the changes there, I'm going to save it, and I'm going to refresh my page over here, and you can see I have the solid border on all sides. Now there's a shorthand version, step 8.1.2. The shorthand version of the border style can be written without the locations by applying space separated values, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All you do is type in border style, and then you put 4 times here, so you can see I got rid of the top one, and I'm going to get rid of this text here, and I'm going to put down border style solid, 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 semicolon. Same thing, and you can save that. Now if all 4 sides are the same value, simply write the value 1 time. So I can get rid of all 3. So if it's going to be the same, just type it in once and do border style. If you need different borders for the top, right, bottom, left, have the differences there. Did you notice that the color border was black, or color black was automatically applied to your border? By default, the border color takes on the color of the content. In this case, the text color is using the browser default of black, so the border will be black. Now step 8.1.4. When you change the font color to red, the border becomes red. And it tells us to add in here, so I click in front of here, enter, move it up 1, color red, and I'll refresh this page, and there you go, it changes it. Style and borders, including the values that will remove border styles, none hidden. There are a number of visual values to choose from, and they go through all the different ones: dotted, dashed, solid. Play around with them if you want to see what they look like. And then also, space separated values start with top and work clockwise. So top, right, bottom, left. So I just remember clockwise. Some web designers use the mnemonic trouble, so Trouble, to remember the order. I would just remember clockwise, that's the easiest. And then you can apply different colors to all 4 sides by specifying locations. And you can see the example there, which is what we did. And then of course you can use the shorthand, and then you can also do a border with shorthand as well, like that, and they kind of show it there. So you can spend more time looking at that, or we can keep moving on. So step 8.1.5, if you don't want the text color to determine the color of the border, try adjusting the color of the border by using the border color property. So I'm going to click here, press enter, type in border color gray, and save it. When I refresh it, it'll change my border color just like that. Border color values, like those for the color property, can use predefined color names, which is what we did. Hexadecimal colors, RGBA colors, or HSL colors, and HSLA colors. So all your different options we learned about before you can use now. Border width. To establish the border width, use the border width property. The width value can be set as a numerical value, pixels, ems, rems, centimeters, etc., or with the keyword medium, thick, and thin. So step 8.1.6, I need to add another change to it. So by default, the width is set to medium, but you'll set the border width to be 10 pixels, just how I typed it. So write your border width, colon, 10 pixels, semicolon, and you can see it changes it. Now, if you style the border with one value each for the width, style, and color properties, the shorthand border property can be used rather than the 3 individual properties. The order of the space-separated values must be border width value, border style value, and border color value. So at step 8.1.7, we're going to use the shorthand. Merge the border width, style, and color into the shorthand border property. So I can just get rid of style here. So it says solid. And then what I can do is literally just get rid of these here. So you can see I start with this and leave my value in here. And then I can just swap it. 10 pixels goes in front of solid. Oh, accidentally got rid of it. And then remove that space there. And I can save it. Same thing. So you can do shorthand, you can do longer, either one. Padding. The padding property allows you to add space between the outer edge of the content box and the inner edge of its border. Like the properties for the border, you can apply values to all 4 sides. So I'm going to, right after border, I'll press enter, add this in. Padding, top, 10%, padding right, 10%, padding bottom, 10%, and padding left, 10%. And then once I refresh, you can see my padding is in there, and it moves it to give some breathing room for the content between that and the border. Now, since the border property has 3 values, it's best to apply 3 values like we just did. Or, excuse me, we actually did 4. If by chance you don't apply a value to a given style, this is what happens. Leaving out the value for border width will cause it to revert to medium value. Leaving out the border color will cause the border to revert to the default value black. And then leaving out the border width will cause the border to be set to none and be no longer visible. So adding 3 values is what it's talking about. While the examples have shown margin and padding with 1, 2, and 4 values, you can also have 3 values, and it shows it. The top is set to the first value, the left and right are set to the second, and the bottom is set to the third. So shorthand, you can take the time to memorize, otherwise you could type it in this way. Since all 4 sides, step 8.1.9, have the same value of 10%, you can use shorthand padding property. And I just go and get rid of top, and then literally I can get rid of all this other stuff. Just like that. Now the margin property allows you to add space between the outside edge of the border and the inner edge of the parent element. In this case, the div element, which surrounds the P element, is the parent element. Step 1.10, in order to see the transparent margin of your content paragraph element, you first need to apply a border to the div class container element. So I'm going to put that down here actually. So container, curly brackets, border, 4 pixel dashed light blue. And then you can see it adds it right over here. Now for step 8.1.11, you can now apply the margin property to each side for your box class selector. So my box class selector is up here, which applies a margin to your paragraph element. So I'm going to click after padding, push enter, and type in margin top 5%, margin right 10%, margin bottom 5%, and margin left 10%. I'll save it and refresh, and you'll see the margins change here. It spreads it out, it looks nicer. While the margin values are not the same, you can still use shorthand margin property. If you give two values, the first value will be applied to top and bottom, and the second value will apply to the left and right. So I'm just going to do that here. Get rid of top and that little hyphen, and then I'll go and get rid of this here. Actually up through here. And there you go. It should look just like that. Same information. Background color heading. Thus far, the boxes you've created are actually transparent. Yes, there is a transparent color value. The white color you see is the default white background color of the browser application. You can apply a background color to any HTML element by using the background color property. So step 8.2.1. In the example document with height h.html, you'll notice there's some content on a white background. So I'm going to actually just type it in here. 02 with height. There we go. Looking at the HTML, you have a parent element. So let's look at that HTML. I'm going to get rid of this file here. Press open. With height is what I'm opening right now. Let's zoom in. And then we'll word wrap our text. It says here for the looking at the HTML, you can have a parent element, which is div class, and then the child element is the paragraph class box. Our parent element is what contains our child element. So div class contains paragraph element. They keep saying this because they want you to get it. So you want that to stick in your head. Step 8.2.2 in the CSS document with height.css, the link style sheet for your HTML document, add the background color to the document. So that's our cue. We need to open up that file. So we need to open up with height.css. I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see my screen. Add background color to the container. So I click over here, press enter, background color light blue. Save it, refresh, and you can see it adds it in. Now, looking at the result on screen doesn't tell the whole story. Let's view the box model in 3D, and you need to look at it. You can see the text is on top. That's the parent element, and the box is blue, or excuse me, the parent element is the blue background color, while the child element is the paragraph, the text. So the text is actually on top of that background color. Notice how the transparent child content box allows the parent box's element background color to show behind the text, and you can also apply a background color property to the child element. So I'm going to go down here to child container box, and I'll type it in, background color gold. Save it, refresh, and you can see the gold color takes over. Well, what happened to the light blue color? Since the child element sits atop the parent element in stacking order, and we'll see more on this in chapter 9, the child's background color covers the parent. And you can see that visual figure 8.1.3, which will show that, explain to you. If you don't set a width to the child element, the child takes on the width of the parent element. And we'll look at controlling the width in the next section. So we're looking at width, height, and overflow. Let's keep things simple while getting to understand the width and height properties of the box model, and just deal with the pixel values for now. If the child's element's width property is not set, it takes on the parent's width. If the width property of the parent element is 500 pixels, which it is, the width of the child element also becomes 500. So it matches each other. If you define the child's width value, and this is under step 824, as half of the parent element, you'll see both background colors. So I'm going to type that in under the child element. I'll put width 250 pixels, save it, refresh. And now you can see it's half and half. Did you notice the child box and parent box got taller when you narrowed the child element's width? That's true. As long as the parent's element's height is not specifically set, it will always extend with its child element. Now step 825. If you set the height property on the child element, the parent element will extend to meet that height too. So I'm going to add that here. Height 225 pixels, semicolon, save it, and refresh. And you can see it changes just like that, added to it. Step 8.2 or 826. But what happens if you set a fixed height on the parent element so the child content extends past the height value you have established? By default, the content will overflow the boundaries of the box. And I'm going to add that in. So box, and instead of, or excuse me, not add it in, but I'm going to actually change this to 150 pixels. And when I save it and refresh, you can see the overflow, or how it changes and goes past this. Normally it's best to not set a height value on the element and to just let the box naturally extend based on the content. However, some designs may warrant the elements as box having an established height. So how can you get the content to stay within the box? Well, step 827. The overflow property gives you some options. You have a choice of setting the value to auto, hidden, scroll, or visible. And we're going to change overflow actually to overflow, auto, semicolon. Save, refresh. Now you notice it puts it in here and I can actually scroll, which is kind of cool. You can take time to switch the values. For sake of time, I'm going to keep moving on. Box sizing. Well, it's easy enough with the background colors to visualize an element's width and height. The padding and border properties also play a role. Looking at 03boxsizing.html in your browser, you can see that the paragraph content element's width property has been given a value of 400. So I'm going to open that up. Let's zoom in. Excuse me, as I clear my throat. Oh, we need to actually open it up in our preview here too. So you can type it in just like I'm doing here. You could always open up the file and browser preview that way. It's up to you. Alright, here it is just like that. Step 831. In the CSS document, CSS box sizing. So I need to close out of this one and close out. I'll close out of it here as soon as I change the box sizing. And zoom in. Let's see what happens when you add 25 pixel value to border and 50 pixel value to padding property for the box class selector, which is down here. So I'm going to add border 25 pixels solid black, padding 50 pixels, save it, refresh, and you can see it added the board just like that. Since you don't have a fixed height, you can determine the exact height of the box by simple math, as you don't know the height of the content. But browsers have tools to help you determine the height. Figure 821 shows the browser inspector tools that will show the size of the box, including the height of your content in case you add. So how you compute styles to look in the box. 108 pixels, content height 50 for padding, 50 for padding bottom, so padding top and bottom, 25 for border top, 25 for border bottom, and it equals 258 total height. You can access the video on Web Developer Tools on the website to learn more. I don't know if it's actually there anymore, but the padding and border properties actually add to your element's visual width and height. And since you know the value of your width, you can apply the formula. So content width, padding right, plus padding left, plus border right, plus border left, total rendered width of the box. So if you plug in the values, you can determine the box's visual width. And they do that there to show 550 pixels. The box sizing and border box can be hazardous to use when retrofitting into an existing project or a project where you're using a lot of third-party code, because it might have unexpected adverse effects on what is already there. So it might be better to just use on the layout elements then need it rather than everything else on the site. Now box sizing. Remember, to all those properties together, add all of them together just to determine an element's width could get a little daunting. Wouldn't it be easier if you could just set the width of an element and know that was just going to be the width? Step 832. So we're going to learn how. The Css Property Box Sizing allows the element width to stay as it is and causes the width to include the border and padding. By adding a universal selector, the asterisk, with the box sizing property with a value of border box, you can change the way the browser renders the element's box size. And it talks about vendor prefix. As you're writing, Firefox needs the Moz prefix, and Android needs the WebKit prefix. Paul Iris has a great blog post on the subject using box sizing. Yada, yada, yada. So let's add this information in. So we're going to add it here. So I'll put my asterisk, curly bracket, enter, Moz, box, sizing, border, box, so I'm readjusting this here, and then we'll just type this in, web kit box sizing border box, and then box sizing border box. We'll save it and refresh, and you can see it adjusted a little bit here to our 400 and 200. Box sizing returns our element to the original width of 400 pixels, which we can see, but increases the height based on the needs of the content, which is true. We saw that too. As you can see from the resolve, figure 822, the browser's inspection tool, figure 823, the overall width is returned to the value 400 you set in your CSS. Instead of the padding and the border width adding to the total width, they move inward. So the formula for your elements box is 250 plus 50 plus 50 plus 25 plus 25 equals 400. Box sizing, box height. The padding and border have reduced the space that the content takes up on the inside of the box. Since the content narrows, it increases in length. And that gives you the formula. Now, browser default margin and padding. One last topic needs to be addressed on the box model. By default, the browser adds some values to the margin and padding of some HTML elements. In example 04 default.html, so let's open that up. Zoom in here for you. And I'll type it in over here. So 04. Oh, let's try it again. I'll move the mouse so you can see it. There we go. I've added a border and background color, which you can see. View the document, css/default.css. So I'm going to exile the box sizing one. Open up the CSS file for default. Zoom in so you can see it, and it looks just like that. Alright. This shows the spacing between elements and within an element. Right here. So padding, all that. Space between and within elements show the browser's default settings for margins and padding on some other elements. Now resetting the default. You can easily override the reset the browser defaults using your own CSS. The 05 reset.html document has the text from the previous example, but the new CSS document reset adds a universal selector that selects all HTML elements and the rules setting the margin and padding properties to a value of 0. And it shows in the textbook, so I'm not going to take the time to open them up. Notice that all the margins and padding have been removed, and you can see the picture in figure 8.25. When you remove the border and background color styles, it becomes more difficult to distinguish between paragraphs, block quotes, and lists. So why would anyone want to remove the browser defaults? Well, it's easier to start from ground zero and not worry what the browser has or has not set. Just know this, simply resetting the defaults and adding in your own CSS rules will not guarantee that your website will look the same in all browsers. While developers have worked to create robust reset style sheets, browsers still have varied support on some CSS rules. A beginner option for reset. Developers have created a number of CSS reset options that remove all or some of the browser's default. Others reset some properties but add in some styles, providing a less intimidating starting point. And then it shows here something you can go to. These types of resets are easy to start with for beginners as well as experienced coders. The example 06 normalize.html uses normalize reset document. So, and you can see the figure right there. For a less intimidating reset. So it points out, basically it looks nicer, it has some of the margins or the organization you had other than the default. Now wrapping things up, while I've tried to present the box model in simple terms, it takes time to really grasp how the content, padding, margin, border, width, height, etc. all play together. The boxing sizing of CSS resets try to get the majority of browsers on a level playing field, but will come to find that your site will still display slightly differently among various browsers, and that's okay. In coming chapters, we'll continue to expand your knowledge of the box model and get into some serious work laying out our website. And that is a wrap up for this chapter, so chapter number 8 of your textbook, the model, or the box model. So make sure you save your files before you close out, and then all you're going to do is, now that I've changed all what I need to change, I can go to my file explorer, and then I'm going to select my chapter, of course, and then choose to zip it. Zip the file. Remember, it's a chapter, so just name it chapter 8 hyphen and your last name. So you're going to name it this, and then you're going to attach that to an email and send it to me for this class. So good job following along in your attention. Hopefully you're following along in the textbook as well. So that way this end part was clear for you. Make sure you submit those files before you move on to the next assignment.